Welcome to Stuff You Should Know, a production of iHeartRadio.
Hey, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Josh. There's Chuck. Jerry's here too. And that makes us Stuff You Should Know, which holds the record for the longest running podcast in the history of the world, as far as I know.
Hey, buddy, before we get going, I wanted to mention, with your permission.
Of course, granted.
I was recently a guest on a very awesome podcast. We don't guest on a lot of shows much anymore, but actor Paul Giamatti has a podcast with his buddy, who is a philosophy professor named Stephen Asma. Mm-hmm. It's called Chinwag. Mm-hmm. And I saw these guys live at Sketchfest, and it was great. And I think Stuff You Should Know people will really not only enjoy my guest appearance, but really love Chinwag.
Yeah, from what you told me, it sounds pretty awesome. I haven't listened quite yet, but I think I'm going to make my first episode your episode.
It's great. I appreciate that. And you should get on it. I told you that. I'm sure they'd love to have you. But Stephen is super smart, and Mr. Paul Giamatti is amazingly smart and just a really well-read, cool guy. And the title says it all. A Chinwag is just sort of a free-flowing chat.
Right.
And that's what it is. We the idea was that we're going to talk about the Silurian hypothesis, which they didn't know about yet, and we had just done a thing on. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, what a great opportunity.
Sure.
But we ended up talking about nuclear semiotics and the Antikythera mechanism and ghost and religion and monkey intercourse. And it's just a really cool talk. And I think Stuff You Should Know people would really dig it. So it's out now at the Chinwag.
Nice, Chuck. Congrats. I can't wait to listen.
All right. Thanks, man. And you should be on. Should we get on with the show?
Yeah, let's.
Well, you know what we get to do now in our typical 2-episode per session way, that is Stuff You Should Know, is we get to wash the stank of Unit 731 off of us
That's
by
a great
talking
idea.
about a very fun thing, which is the Guinness Book of World Records, or the Guinness World Records. I feel like when I was a kid, it was called the Guinness Book of World Records in the United States. Mm-hmm. I imagine that we are similar in that you probably had a copy of this in your house.
No.
Oh, you didn't?
No, we weren't all la-di-da. I had to get one from the school library.
We had a copy of the Guinness Book. I think I probably got it as a Christmas gift one year. And just
maybe your dad lifted it from his school library and brought it home.
Oh, he may have. Property of Redan Elementary School. So I remember very distinctly, though, pouring through this thing as a kid and just like, it was such a big book. It was so thick and the type was so small, and the pictures weren't great. But I poured over every page of this thing like it was my Bible or something. I was so into it. I thought it was so cool. This may have been my Uncle John's bathroom reader for you.
No, yeah, okay.
Or
I got
you. Have both?
No. Uncle John's bathroom reader definitely trumped it for sure. But I was still very much a fan of the Guinness Book of World Records for sure.
Do you remember some of those pictures from the classic edition?
Oh, yeah. The guy with the longest fingernails also had a really long beard, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and the two guys, those two heavy twins on the motorbikes.
Yeah, I think the McCrary brothers.
Yeah, the tall guy, that big, giant tall guy, and the tall lady.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about them. Yeah, that's crazy. We both grew up on the same pictures, and they helped shape us. Isn't that neat?
Yeah, I mean, they're just burned into my brain. I don't remember some of the names. I want to say that guy's name was Robert Wadlow, but that's just literally digging out from my, 9-year-old lizard brain.
That would be pretty impressive if you just did that.
Well, you pulled the brothers out of your keister.
Oh, I looked them up.
Okay.
I'm not walking around with their name in my head, unfortunately. I'm not that good.
Anyway, that's what we're talking about, is this great book that is still going strong at about 1 million copies a year. And we're going to talk all about the Guinness Book right now.
Yeah, let's. But before we do, Chuck, let's give a shout out to listener Mallory Stafford, who's the one who suggested that we do an episode on the Guinness Book of World Records. So thanks a lot, Mallory.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, let's go back, Chuck, way back to the 1940s, technically 1950, but we'll check in 1945 with a guy named Sir Hugh Beaver. This is
Excuse
before
me?
he was Sir Hugh Beaver.
Oh, okay.
and this was before he was a knight. I believe he was knighted probably because of his work with the Guinness Book of World Records.
That has to be.
Guessing here at this point, but I think it's a pretty safe bet, although a completely superfluous and unnecessary one. But he ended up going to work for Guinness and Son, the beer company.
Yeah.
So if you've ever wondered if the Guinness Book of World Records is actually connected to the Guinness Beer Company, my friend, yes, they absolutely are. The guy who was the managing director of Guinness Son and Company Limited, the Guinness Beer Company, was also the guy responsible for coming up with the Guinness Book of World Records.
That's right. It was a Guinness product, in fact, and we'll get to all that. But that, to me, is right out of the gate. You got one of the facts of the podcast. If people, next time you're in a bar and someone draws up a Guinness, just say, hey, the Guinness Book of World Record is started out because of the Guinness beer. And if they say no, you just smash their face on the bar, dump that Guinness all over their head.
Knowing me and my luck, I would say that, and they'd be like, oh, really? You don't think everybody knows that?
Right.
That's what I would be met with. And then I'd smash their face on the bar.
Right. So there's a pretty good story here that kind of is the seed of this whole idea, and it goes as follows. In 1950, as you promised, Sir Hugh Beaver was hunting with some friends in Ireland and missed a shot. And boy, this seemed to really get at this guy. He missed a shot of a golden plover bird and was like, hey, did you see that, how fast that thing was? Like, nobody could shoot that thing. That's got to be the fastest game bird in Europe. And they were like, oh, you kidding me? That thing's not that fast. There's no way.
He was on tranquilizers.
Yeah, you just missed the shot, my friend. That's not the fastest game bird. And he was like, oh, I got to find an answer to this. And he could not find it in a reference book. So I said this really bothered the guy. And this is how I know, is that 4 years later,
mm-hmm.
he's still thinking about missing that shot. And he's like, oh, you know what we need is a book that says stuff like this.
Yeah. That was the origin of the Guinness Book of World Records. That missed shot, that golden plover that lived. Had it not lived, maybe this whole thing would have never happened.
Seriously, had he have shot that bird, we may not have gotten those twins on the motorbike.
No. And it's a good thing that golden plover lived for a couple of reasons. Not the least of which is that the golden plover got to live.
Hooray.
But because it stuck with Sir Hugh Beaver for so long, for 4 years, that he finally was like, it morphed. I can't imagine how many times he chewed it over before it finally became the idea for a book that actually has facts like what's the fastest game bird in all of Europe. Yeah. And so he went to the people that he worked for at Guinness as the managing director and was like, I've got this great idea. We can put together a book of facts that can settle the kind of like arguments and disputes that arise at a pub. And we'll give them as free Guinness giveaways at pubs. Yeah. And we're even going to make the cover waterproof so that if you spill beer on it, it'll be fine. Every pub in all of England's going to have one of these things. And anytime there's an argument at a pub, they're going to pull this thing out. That was the original idea for the Guinness Book of World Records. And it's a genius idea.
Yeah, and just fun. Like, I just love the whole spirit behind it. That very first version has a foreword that said that that the hope was that it could resolve arguments and turn heat into light. So, just the very idea of the pub argument is just sort of fun to think about, I think, period.
For sure.
And now you have an actual waterproof covered book that they're giving out with that Guinness name on it. It's pretty brilliant.
Yeah. So Hugh Beaver, though, was
Wait,
not
who?
one. Hugh Beaver.
Okay.
There's different ways to say it. Hugh Beaver.
Sure.
I mean, I know what you're getting at. I'm just being playful.
I'm not getting at anything, buddy.
Oh, you lie.
You're going to smash your face on the bar.
So Hugh Beaver, I said Hugh Beaver, by the way.
Okay.
He was not one to go around and like make books. He was kind of like an idea guy rather than a book making guy. Yeah. So he turned to two guys this was just right up their alley. They were identical twins named Norris and Ross McWhorter. And they ran an agency that essentially was a fact-checking and fact-providing agency for newspapers and things like that, media outlets.
Like fun stuff, though.
But it was also, I think if you had a fact you wanted to confirm, you would call them and they would turn to their encyclopedias and be like, yes, off the top of my head, I know that that's correct.
Right. Exactly.
That's what the McWhorters did. And so it was a great idea to reach out to these guys and be like, hey, what if you take your entire profession and make it a book, but just select the most interesting stuff and put it into a book. And that's what we're going to make. And they said, let's do it.
That's right. They formed their own company based in London called Guinness Superlatives, and they spent about 4 months with just the sort of sourcing of what would go in the book. It took about a year to get the first edition out, but they spent about 4 months just sending, this is 1954, so they're sending letters to experts. They're sending letters to people all over the world saying, what's the biggest thing? What's the smallest this? What's the fastest that? Just like thousands and thousands of entries. And they were pretty serious. They wanted this to be a legitimate, factual book. So they were from the get, they were very fastidious in their research. And they found that even experts sometimes would either get things wrong or exaggerate stuff.
What?
Livia found this great thing. She put together a really good base article for this one. And she said one of the things that they found was one expert said that there was a fly that broke the speed of sound, that flew at 820 miles per hour. So they were like, all right, we have to do more work, even though we're getting in touch with experts.
Yeah, that was all the way back in 1926. So for decades, people have been walking around thinking that there was a fly that could do that. And these guys were the kind. These guys were the kind who would just come along and be like, "That's not true." So that, the Guinness Book of World Records, long had, and starting out of the gate, long had this reputation for being just accurate and correct. They really did their research and they really double checked. And the people that they were citing and polling and going to were experts in their field, and not even crackpot experts in their field, like the fly guy.
The fly guy, Jeff Goldblum?
No, the guy the expert who said that the deer botfly could fly faster than the speed of sound.
I was kidding.
Oh,
okay.
I thought you'd forgotten already.
No. Or maybe it was Jeff Goldblum for all we know.
It could have been.
So in August 27th, in fact, 1955, the very first edition came out. It was titled Guinness Book of Records, close to 200 pages, 198 pages, that had about initially 4,000 just factual entries, and then just a collection, not too many, but about 18 pages of some photographs, black and white pictures, a few pen and ink drawings. And it was pretty successful. They were like, let's print 50,000 of these, give them out at pubs. But they realized very, very quickly, it came out August 27th, and they were like, we can actually sell these things. So they started selling that fall, just a couple of months later. And by Christmas, had sold 187,000 of these. Yeah,
supposedly since then, it's sold about 150 million copies worldwide.
Wow.
Which is just astronomical. That's just such a crazy amount of books. And just out of the gate, they clearly tapped into something that people love. People love that kind of thing. They created the internet in book form before anyone even thought of the internet or computers.
Yeah, totally.
So they were like, well, this is great. Let's start churning out more and more of these. And they started putting out the first American edition that came out the next year, country-specific editions in the years that followed. And even while they were doing this, even while they were cranking these things out, the McWhorters were like, we're not going to sacrifice accuracy or factualness. That is the pinnacle of what we're doing. It has to be accurate. And it can be super interesting, but also we need to kind of keep it family-friendly. And there was a famous quote from Norris, who was apparently the heart and soul of the book. Norris was. He said that ours is the kind of book maiden aunts give to their nieces. Basically saying we can't have smut in there. Probably the word that Norris would have used was smut.
Yeah. Like us, with, they were G-rated. We're probably PG.
Yeah. Sometimes PG-13, frankly.
Yeah. We are the kind of guys that'll sit around and make jokes about Sir Hugh Beaver. So while they're researching, they do finally, and this is just a side note, they get to the bottom of this fastest European game bird. That plover was 62 miles an hour, and apparently the spur-winged goose is 88. But now, apparently, on the website, there's a red-breasted merganser that can go, I guess that's 91 miles an hour?
No, I think that the spur-winged goose's record of 88 is so thoroughly debated that they can't say for certain that it's the fastest European game bird. The one
so
that
the
they can
merganser's
say for
81?
certain. Yeah, that's what I've gotten from it.
Okay.
So there's like a horrible twist to all of this. Suddenly that happened, 25 years after the first book came out. Like they've been churning out editions every year, multiple editions a year. And so in the midst of all this, Ross and Norris are just still doing their job, but they've gotten kind of wealthy along the way. And apparently Ross was not very happy that the IRA was bombing places in Britain, in England in particular, and he offered a 50,000 pound reward. This is back in 1975. I didn't do the conversion, but let's just say it could buy you a lot of Big Macs today. A 50,000 pound reward for any information that would help convict IRA bombers. And I guess he thought that this was going to be effective, and it was not at all effective. It actually turned out to be a terrible move for him.
Yeah, Ross was a fairly controversial political activist in addition to his job, and the IRA did not cotton to that. So on November 27th of 1975, Harry Duggan and Hugh Doherty of the Balcombe Street Gang shot him point blank in the head and chest with a .357 outside of his house and killed him dead. And so Ross was gone, and I'm sure Norris was devastated, but kept on as the editor. Norris did until 1986, and then for another decade as an advisor to the project.
Yes. Eventually, Guinness, the beer company, was like, this has been a pretty good run. We've been doing this for over half a century now. And they eventually sold the Guinness World Records, GWR is what it's usually referred to another company called Gullane, which was a production company for children's television shows, including Thomas the Tank Engine. And I guess the head of Gullane sobered up a couple of days later and was like, what am I going to do with this? And ended up selling it to the Jim Pattison Group, which is owned by a Canadian billionaire named Jim Pattison, and bears more than a small resemblance to the Scheinhart Wig Company, in that they have their hands in like everything. They own Peterbilt, they own the Great Wolf Lodges, they own Associated Grocers, they own everything, including the Guinness Book of World Records, as well as Ripley Entertainment. And so over time, they've kind of added to what the Guinness World Records does. It's one of the reasons why you don't say the Guinness Book of World Records is because they've definitely expanded beyond the book now.
Yeah, I think Ripley sort of laid the mold, as in having like a Ripley Museum of Curiosities, that kind of thing. There are now Guinness museums and stuff like that. And it's become an attraction here in different cities. I know I've never been to one. I'm trying to think where I've even seen one. Maybe Hollywood has one. I don't know.
Ooh, Hollywood.
They've got a Ripley. But yeah, they become a part tourist attraction as well. And maybe that's a good place to break.
Oh yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, we can find out where one of these is, and we'll go, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Learning things with Chuck and Josh. Stuff you should know.
Chuck, that was a fantastic road trip. I've never drank so much Coke Zero in my entire life.
Right. Oh, man, I've been drinking Guinness. Glad you were driving.
I know, I've been driving. Well, anyway, getting back to Guinness, the world records, not all the beer you've been drinking on our road trip, they are, even though they're owned by the Jim Pattison Group, they still are their own company, doing their own thing, and they're headquartered in London, but they also have offices in Dubai, Tokyo, New York, Beijing, and there's like 400 people that work for Guinness World Records around the world.
Yeah, amazing. On the book, just, let's go to the stats. You mentioned over 150 million total copies. I believe I said still about 1 million a year. It's been translated into 40 different languages. When you open up one of those books, you're going to find a couple of different things. Well, you'll find tons of things, but kind of a couple of different categories. One is all that stuff we were talking about, like the fastest bird, the tallest this or that, like the tallest skyscraper, just sort of things that have hit a superlative.
Right.
You're also going to find a lot of firsts, like the first person to do this, the first person to complete this. And then you're going to find a bunch of kind of goofy fun records, which is the whole category where people are like, I want to get in that book. Yeah. And so I can either break a record that's in there, or I can think of my own, like hula hooping, or, well, I'm sure that's in there, but, you know, longest underwater tea party. That's probably in there for all I know, but I just made that up. But stuff like that. Yeah, no, I'm sure that's in there. I know there's like the most number of magic tricks performed underwater. Like if it can be done underwater, there's a record for it. And the reason that there are so many records is because apparently tens of thousands of people every single year. I think the number that I saw back in 2008 on a Freakonomics interview with the current editor-in-chief, a guy named Craig Glenday, he put it at about 50,000 applicants per year. People who are like, I think I just did break a record, or I'm going to attempt to break a record. So let's go. Let's do this. 50,000 people a year try to do that. I wonder how many morning pictures of a toilet they get every year where someone's like, I think I just broke a record.
Oh, gross, dude. PG-13. That's PG.
Yeah, but, you know, I bet people do it. 50,000 entries there. What you do is, so you apply, again, to either break a record or create a new thing. And you get a log into the system as an official applicant. When you are part of that process, you can then search their own private database. There is a public-facing database, but the real gold, all the stuff is in that private database where you can just look through all those records, see if there's anything you think you can break, and then look at all the guidelines. And this is where apparently about half the people drop out is when they see like all the stuff that you have to do to make it an official, like legit submitted record.
Yeah, because the guidelines can reach into the dozens of pages sometimes. Like they're so specific and detailed about what constitutes a record, what specifically you have to do, and a lot about what you can't do. And I read an interview with Craig Glenday by Imogene West Knights in The Guardian. If she doesn't sound like a Guardian writer, I don't know who does.
Yeah.
But she said that she tried to break the record for standing on one leg blindfolded. Apparently it's like 30 something minutes. And she got to like 30 seconds, I think, on her 3 tries. But she said that it had 6 pages of guidelines just for that. Yes. Yeah. So the more detailed, the more intricate the actual like record is, the longer the guidelines are going to be. So like you said, about half the people are like, nuts to this. I don't care that much about this. And that really kind of separates a lot of the posers out. What you have left are the real deal record breaker people.
I'm sure a lot of people are like, I probably just have to click a thing and upload a video.
I think a lot of people think that, yeah.
You know, yeah. Not a Guinness, my friend.
Wrong.
All right, so here's just a few things. If you want to qualify for a title, a record has to be the following. It has to be measurable. Easy enough.
Check.
It has to be breakable. Unless it's a quote, significant first, like first person to do something. Has to be something that someone else can try to do and break.
Check.
It has to be standardizable, which is anyone all over the world could try and do this thing.
I think that's great. That's very inclusive.
Yeah, I like it too. It has to be verifiable, obvi.
Like you can't be the person with the most ghosts haunting them.
No, right. Yeah, exactly. Most haunted person.
Right.
This one is interesting. It has to involve a single variable. So you could be like longest underwater tea party, but if there is that record, you can't be like, well, I'm the longest underwater tea party wearing a tutu.
Right. Yeah, for sure. They definitely, the guy explained in that Freakonomics interview that if you open it up like that, it just, it's going to just grow exponentially, and it's just dumb. He's like, no, underwater tea party, longest underwater tea party. That's interesting. Who cares if you're wearing a tutu or not? Frankly, you should be wearing a tutu if you have an underwater tea party. That should be, it should go without saying.
Yeah. The last two things are, it has to be universal. So like, because they sell this book all over the world, it has to be something that everyone can kind of see and understand and enjoy.
Very inclusive again.
Yeah, very much inclusive. And then finally, it has to be substantially different than a current record.
Yeah, which ties into that underwater tea party tutu thing.
Yeah, a little bit, I think.
So about 50,000 applications a year, like we said. And I think something like every year, 2,000 new records are added to the Guinness World Records database. So say 25,000 give it a try, 2,000 are successful. That's what, between 5 and 10%, I think, of attempts are successful. That's actually not too bad. And this database just keeps growing and growing. Apparently there's like 40,000 records. And if you're trying to set a record, you have access to all 40,000 because you need to. But if you're just hanging out on the website and just looking up stuff for fun, so you can still see 15,000 different records, but only 4,000 records are put into the book every year. And a lot of those are like classics. Like I think at least half are like classic ones that have been in there for years and years and years that people just want to see, that weren't necessarily broken, in the past year.
Yeah, I tried to find new entries in the book each year, and I couldn't find that number. But, I mean, it's not a lot. So less than 5% even get that world record. So out of 50,000 people, you have a very, very slim chance of making it in that book if that's what and that's kind of what everyone's goal is. You want to be in the book.
You do, because that's the thing. Even if you set a record, you're not necessarily going to be in the book. Like you said, there's actually you have a slim chance of being in the book. Even if you break a record, the thing you can definitely be guaranteed to get is a certificate saying that you are the official record holder, and you'll be in that giant database.
Yeah. Should we tell the story of our friend and guy who designed our website?
The webmaster.
Yeah. Our buddy Brandon, you should tell the story because you understand more about this. I guess that you knew that Brandon had briefly held a Guinness record. Is that right? And you emailed about it?
Yes, he and a friend. So apparently Brandon was one of those people who we'll kind of touch on later on in the show, but he's one of those people who just had like a lifelong ambition. It was on his life list, as he put it, to break a world record, to be a world record holder.
So
he just
cool.
wanted to do it.
Yeah, I love it.
So he said he looked into all sorts of different stuff. I think one of them was like fastest moonwalk in 100 meters, longest distance traveled on like a bouncy ball. And he finally came up with fastest 400 meter piggyback ride.
Okay.
And he and a friend trained for that for a while, from what I remember. And they finally did it. They broke the record. And apparently the record he chose was just randomly not the record he should have chosen, because they had their record broken by somebody else so quickly that he wasn't even able to get a certificate. He said that he got an email saying like your record was broken, but for a very brief time, you were the world record holder on the 400 meter piggyback ride.
Oh man, poor Brandon.
I know. But he's got that to carry around with him. He achieved his life goal. Because think about it. He could have trained for years and still never broken the record, but he did.
Do you know if he was the piggybacker or piggybackee?
I believe he was which one's
I honestly don't know.
Okay, so he was the guy carrying the piggy, as far as I remember.
Okay, I think that would be the piggybacker. Oh no, maybe the piggybackee.
I would say the piggybackee is probably what that would be.
Let's go to the polls.
Okay.
All right, so we talked a little bit about what you have to do to get a record or what qualifies. They do exclude. Here's what you can't do. You can't do something that's dangerous to other people. If you're a grown adult and you want to try something, reasonably dangerous, like a skydive or something. I think Olivia found the example of a bonsai skydive. That's when I'd never heard of this. That's when you throw your parachute out of the plane, then you jump out and you wait as long as you can before like grabbing hold of this thing and deploying it. So you can do something like that if you're a grown adult and decide that you want to undertake that danger. But what you can't do is put someone else in danger.
Right. And there's some other stuff too that they're like, we're not doing this anymore. Like anything that has to do with pets.
Yeah.
That it involves that could be dangerous to them. Like they used to do like a heaviest pet thing, and then they were like, just having a record out there constitutes a dare to some people. So there's just some things we shouldn't do. And encouraging people to overfeed their pet so that they can become the world record holders that's just one we should avoid. Excessive eating for people as well, like humans as well.
Yeah, for sure.
What else?
Anything involving drinking, funny kind of for Guinness, but they're like, I get the spirit, but you can't try and set the record for, funneling Jack Daniels.
Gross.
Like Ken Marino did in Party Town.
You just made me nauseated, man.
Anything illegal, obviously, is not allowed. And then anything involving kids under 16 that they deem unsuitable. If you're between 16 and 18 and it is suitable, you still have to have a parent or guardian sort of sign up with you. Yeah,
that Craig Glenday, the editor-in-chief, was like, we actually don't trust parents to not give their kids steroids to break some of these records. So we're just not going to do that at all. Some of the other ones, they used to do longest kiss, but like you have to keep kissing and people would kiss for literally days and it's just dangerous. Dance marathon, same thing.
Yeah.
And then invasive surgery, Chuck. They used to have stuff for invasive surgery and now they're like, people will actually go get surgery just to be a record holder. So we should stop doing that as well.
Boy. All right. So let's take another break and we'll talk about how these things are judged or, kind of the oversight, I guess, right after this.
Learning things with Chuck and Josh. Stuff you should know.
All right, so we promised talk of oversight. Very exciting stuff. But you can't just willy-nilly send in a video and say, all right, I've done my job. They employ what are called adjudicators.
Adjudicator!
That's right. There are about 90 of them that travel all over the world. In pre, sort of digital age, this is the only way to do it. You would have an adjudicator come to you. The adjudicators apparently have to, it's sort of like Mission Impossible. You agree to, like, hey, I got to go to Singapore. And then you find out what record that you're agreeing to oversee, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What's this business about a jacket?
Oh, well, you have to wear the officially approved outerwear.
Yeah.
a jacket that has like the Guinness World Records logo on it. You also, there's other rules too. You can't socialize with the record attempters.
No.
Or their people after hours.
Nope. No
fraternization. You have to be very professional. Yeah, no fraternization. You can't eat or drink during the whole thing. Like you're just meant to be an impartial, business-like professional.
Yeah.
That's what your job is. No matter how wacky or nuts what the person is trying to do is, you're taking it seriously. They're trying to break a record. That's your job as an adjudicator. And like you said, they travel the world. Apparently, there's a huge emphasis on speaking to the media because that's a big role for Guinness World Records. They're a media company that's extraordinarily media savvy. So they make sure that their 90 adjudicators are savvy as well.
Yeah. And you go through about a week of training, and part of that is media training and just simple stuff like how to work a measuring tape or how to measure whatever you need to measure. You mentioned that they have to take it seriously, even if it's dumb. You also have to have the very, you're faced with a very tough job of telling someone, sometimes a small child is trying to break a record, that they failed and that they didn't get it. So you have to be able to break the news to people in a way that I would assume has some compassion, a note of compassion. And then sometimes you might be in a situation that you need to get out of. Like Glenday was talking about this, one adjudicator was, or maybe Glenday was sent.
I think it was him, yeah.
Yeah, to Moscow on an attempt to break the largest concrete pouring. The engineers learned that they couldn't make it possible due to the weather conditions, so they were going to try and fake it. So he's there in Moscow. These guys are trying to fake this thing, and the idea that they came up with which was officially sanctioned, and I guess this is probably a rule, is like, hey, if you're in a scary situation like that, just tell them they got the record and get out of there, and we'll revoke it the next day.
Yeah, that's what he did. He was worried about standing on the edge of a massive hole with the kind of people who would try to break a concrete pouring record and be upset when you told them that they didn't break the record. He was like, no, I'm just going to go ahead and say, yes, congratulations. And then the next day text them, sorry, I have to revoke it. LOL.
Yeah. They come with that certificate, framed certificate. If they fail, they shred it. I was going to say right in front of their face.
I was going to say, hopefully not in front of them.
They shred it to make sure it's not stolen from somebody.
They shred it and then they make the attempter eat the shredded paper.
With some marinara. But these days, obviously, even with 90 adjudicators, there are 50,000 entries. Even if half of those drop out, you still can't send these people all over the world that much. So now in the digital age, most of this stuff is remote, but there are lots of strict rules and hoops you have to jump through to prove that you're not faking, again, just some video that you've deep faked or something.
Yeah. I mean, they take this quite seriously. Like you can't send a video that shows it and just that, like you just did it yourself. You set up a camera on a tripod and you may very well have broken the record, but that doesn't cut it. You have to have actual live witnesses who are not family members, who are not even friends necessarily.
I don't even like this guy.
There's a lot, right? There's a lot you want to do ahead of time to understand and make sure that you're doing everything correctly, which is why they have those guidelines, which again is why a lot of people drop out because they think I just need to set up a phone on like one of those tabletop mounts and, hula hoop for 18 days in front of it. And that'll do that.
Yeah, you can, though, I mentioned the adjudicators obviously can't go to that many places. It seems like they're pretty much reserved these days for paid appearances. So you can fast track if you've got 6,000 pounds or almost 7,500 American US dollars, you can fast track your record and get that adjudicator to come out. It's a lot of money to drop on a world record, but if you're into that, then you can spend that.
My friend, you think that's a lot of money? Imagine 11,000 pounds to get an adjudicator to come out.
And what is that?
Well, that is actually like a separate wing of Guinness World Records.
Oh,
it's called GWR Consultancy, and it's a controversial new revenue stream, as the HR would put it, where if you're a company, you're a brand, again, as HR would put it, you can go to GWR Consultancy and say like, hey, I'm not getting a lot of play on Instagram these days. How can I get my brand out there in a really eye-popping way?
Yeah.
And GWR Consultancy says, well, let's figure out a record you can break that may or may not be tied to your business. But either way, we're going to make a big deal out of it, and you will get some media exposure, even if you don't break the record. But you're going to have to pay us some money first. And everything that they're doing is above the boards. It like when the company tries to break the record, supposedly like a quarter of them don't do it, even though this is like almost tailor-made for their company, they still don't necessarily succeed, and none of them make it in the book. It's a money-making side, but they're still legitimately setting or breaking records.
Yeah, I'm trying not to like knock it too much. About half their revenue comes from that. Companies need to make money, but it almost just feels like, hey, if you want to pay for this official stamp, then you can do so.
Like the Better Business Bureau. Like you can pay to get a higher rating.
Yeah.
Which is like, well, what's the point of the Better Business Bureau? That doesn't quite rise to that with Guinness World Records because they're still saying, like, yes, they paid to get, their thing fast tracked and to get an adjudicator out there to work with them about figuring it. Like, we worked with them, but they're actually doing this actual thing and they may or may not succeed. So it is legitimate. It is like I said, it's controversial, and a lot of people like you don't like it. There are some that have been way more controversial than others. Guinness got itself in a little bit of international hot water because apparently Turkmenistan's dictator, Gurbanguly Berdimuhammedov, I practiced that so much, Chuck.
Say the last name.
And I still didn't get it quite right. I'm going to try it again. Gurbanguly Berdimuhammedov.
I think that's right.
So I found his name from John Oliver on Last Week Tonight.
Oh, you didn't say it with a British accent.
No. He's like, not to be confused with the Gurbanguly Berdimuhammedov that you went to high school with. This is the dictator from Turkmenistan.
Quality
and
joke.
the reason, he was apparently a fan of the Guinness World Records. And so he started like ordering his country to start breaking records. And Guinness worked with them and took a lot of heat for it.
Yeah, I mean, this record is so dumb. One of the ones that was successful was highest density of buildings with white marble cladding.
Yes, but he didn't have that already and then call Guinness. He ordered that to be built in one of the cities in Turkmenistan so that that Turkmenistan could have this record.
Yeah, well, because of stuff like this, some of the old guard that used to work there isn't too thrilled with the direction the company's taken.
Mm-hmm.
There's a woman named Anna Nicholas, who was the head of PR in the 80s and 90s, in a Guardian interview that was just saying, like, they've kind of lost their way. They're more sensationalist, too sensationalist now. And Norris McWhirter's own son, Alistair, said they've lost the intellectual integrity that the twins had.
As well as that love and feeling.
That's right. Should we talk about some fun records?
Let's, but real quick, I just want to kind of put a bow on that whole thing. What we're talking about is the Guinness Book of World Records, not just surviving, but actually thriving in the internet age. And that is just amazing in and of itself. It's not just like some brand that's on like its last leg or something like that. It still sells 1 million books a year. It still makes like international news. They're very media savvy. Like they'll tie world records to, international news, and all of a sudden they're in the international news cycle. Like they're still around. And one of the reasons why is because they still adhere to like the principles that Norris and Ross created, which is like, it has to be correct. It has to be accurate. It has to be factual. It has to be legitimate. And they try to do that as much as possible. I think some people are like, they're playing way too fast and loose for that to be the case still, but they're still doing it. And I say hats off. I'm really glad that the Guinness World Records are still around.
Totally. Absolutely.
Okay. Now we can talk about some funny records.
Okay, good. We'll talk fingernails because we mentioned that early. That was one of the just sort of legendary pictures from those early books was that Chinese priest, didn't even have a name on this guy, who had those curly, long curly fingernails, 22 3/4 inches. Today, the woman who owns that record is a woman named Diana Armstrong. I believe she's from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And her total fingernail length is over 42 feet, close to 42 feet, 10.4 inches. And she, this is very sad, but she hasn't cut her nails since 1997 when her 16-year-old daughter died from an asthma attack in her sleep. And her daughter apparently loved her mom's fingernails, helped her do her nails. So Diana Armstrong was like, I'm never cutting these. And if you wonder what 42 feet of fingernails looks like,
it's astounding.
Yeah, like there's pictures where she's holding her hand about shoulder height, and the fingernails reach all the way down to the floor like a cane.
Mm-hmm.
And they are just astounding looking. I don't know how she gets anything done.
Yeah, and we have to like give credit to the previous record holder, a woman named Lee Redman, who held the record before Diana Armstrong, and who I guess is like, okay, if you're going to lose it to somebody else, like that's a pretty good person to lose it to.
Yeah.
So what about Evel Knievel? I remember we mentioned this in the Evel Knievel two-parter, which I still can't believe we did.
Broken Bones by a Human.
Yeah, 433.
As the
All
story
at
goes.
once.
Yeah. No, not all at once.
There's a guy named George Kaminsky who was serving a life sentence in Pennsylvania. And apparently the prison yards in Pennsylvania were full of four-leaf clovers. And for a little while, Kaminsky held the largest collection of four-leaf clovers at just under 73,000 four-leaf clovers that he collected while in prison. And then they moved him to a prison with fewer four-leaf clovers in the prison yard. And he suddenly he lost his record.
All right. I would like to mention Ashrita Furman, because if you're wondering if someone wanted to hold like the record for Guinness records, then that of course has happened. This is a dude in New York City. He has the record for the most world records, and he's been doing this for 40 years plus. He was a kid just like us that was sort of obsessed with this book, and in the late 1970s was like, all right, here's my deal. I want to get in that book more than anyone else by doing stuff like jumping jacks and farthest distance trekked on while balancing a bike on a chin, hula hooping underwater. These are the sort of little just funny, odd human feats that Ashrita has made over the years. And you know how many records is it?
700 plus.
700 plus.
Yeah. I mean, he just said it's his life's work to hold as many records as he possibly could. And he holds the record for the most records, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's just amazing, man. I love that.
Yeah.
He's apparently a really good guy, too. Like, he helps other people who are like him figure out, what records to go after.
How could he
he's
not
like
be?
a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, I think there's an economy of scale to it. So, for example, he holds the record for longest distance, I guess walked or whatever, with a bicycle balanced on your chin.
Yeah.
He also holds the record for the most pint glasses balanced on your chin, 81. That's a lot of pint glasses, pint glasses.
He got good at balancing things on his chin.
Yeah, so I think that's what he'll do. He'll like dedicate himself to learning something, and then you can break a bunch of different records by doing similar things, right? Like balancing stuff on your chin. But he's all over the place. Like most arrows broken with your neck in 1 minute.
Sure.
Like hula hooping underwater. Like he's not a one-trick pony. He's a multiple-trick pony, I guess is the best way to put it.
Hey, you got to be if you want to set the record for records.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Chuck.
Yeah.
There's so much more I want to say, but we'll never come up with a better ending for this episode than that. So let's leave it at that. Huh?
Agreed.
If you want to know more about Guinness World Records, then friends, there are some great ones out there that you can delight and amuse yourself and your friends with. Just go all over the internet, or even better, go buy a copy of the Guinness Book of World Records. It comes out every year. And since I said it comes out every year, that's triggered listener mail.
Well, I'm going to call this Wind Power in Texas. We've heard from quite a few Texans. This is from Ben in Denton, Texas. Mm-hmm. Hey, guys, it's fun to hear you talk about the great ways that we bolstered our wind and solar over the years. A lot of people don't realize that Texas has its own grid. And another thing people don't realize is that there are many municipally owned utility companies here, and Denton is one. The city of Denton owns and manages utilities for its citizens. I was actually a member of the Public Utilities Board for a couple of years, which is a board made just of citizens to have oversight of the city's utility operations, and I really learned a lot. Namely, that Denton has pushed to source our electricity supply exclusively from renewable resources for many years now. Denton also has a huge push for other renewable energy efficient options for its citizens, from discounts on solar panels and smart thermostats to free trees for your property.
Nice.
While we're talking about Texas, Denton is the home to one of the largest universities in Texas, University of North Texas. Oh, I meant to look at their mascot. Failed to do so. Which makes it a little bit of a liberal-leaning town in a lot of ways, but much of Texas obviously is still hyper-conservative. It's a real shame how many politicians here seem to be arbitrarily pushing it to shut down solar and wind farms. There's no logical reason for it, Sure, it doesn't grow the oil industry, but it does grow our supply in total, which is what we need. And it's sustainable, which is a win-win in my book. Anyways, as always, I appreciate what you guys do, what you say, and how you say it. May not always agree, but that's life. That is from Ben Jumper.
Very nice. Thanks a lot, Ben.
What are they? Did you look it up?
Do you want me to look it up? It's the University of North Texas, right?
Yeah. Sure, why not?
Can you hear me going beep, 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 beep? I'm looking it up.
Type. I've got it right here, Scrappy the Eagle.
I would have never come up with that.
That's their mascot. They say they're the Mean Green Nation.
Okay.
So, yeah, they're the North Texas Mean Green.
There you go.
So go Mean Green.
Yes, and go wind energy. Who is that from again?
That was from Ben Jumper.
Thanks a lot, Ben. That's wonderful. Glad you're doing great work out there. Keep it up, buddy. And if you want to be like Ben and tell us about some great work your town or your region or your country or your universe is doing, we want to hear about it. You can send it via email to stuffpodcast@iheartradio.com.
Stuff You Should Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.